Hello, welcome back or welcome to my channel. My name is Taylor and today we're going to be doing our 2026 Queer Book Recs. The annual tradition has been kept up, but before I open the video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you love all things books. So this is year 3 or 4 of me doing 10 queer book recs for you. Now I haven't gone back and looked at what I recommended last year or the years before, so maybe there might be some repeats on here, but I have read plenty of 5-star queer reads this year, and I tried to run the spectrum of the Saphics, the gays, and everything in between, and there's a lot to discuss. Now I also should have a mixture of YA, adult, like fantasy, romance, thrillers, and all that. The only thing I don't have is nonfiction. However, I will do a nonfiction recommendation over on the TikTok shorts situation, because I do recommendation, like short form recommendations every year for every letter of the Alphabet Mafia, as well as I do a queer nonfiction book rec. So if you're looking for queer nonfiction, we'll do that in shorts. We'll also probably do it in October for Pride History Month. But if you don't know anything about me, hello, I'm your fellow resident chaotic bisexual woman. You know, I got the purple on, I got the pink earrings, my hair is somewhat, the only thing, well, I guess the blue is in here somewhere. We tried, and I love to read queer books, and I love to recommend them. At least a third of my reading every year is queer books, and I like to think that I have somewhat decent taste in reading, given how many books I read a year, but then again, I also have pretty trash taste in some of the things I like, so to each their own. But yeah, I primarily read romance, so there's going to be a lot of romance, but I actually have a pretty good, decent selection of fantasy here. Now, some of these books are pretty popular, well-known books, and some of them aren't, so hopefully you can span the gamut of your favorite, recommendations, as well as if you have any favorite recommendations you would like to leave in the comments down below, please do. However, if you're going to be a hater or a homophobe or anything of that like, just know that you will be blocked or deleted and so on and so forth. And before you ask, do you have to do that? Yes, because it has happened many times before and we don't stand that on this channel. So without further ado, let's go over all the books that I own physically first, and then we can dive into my non-physical books that I have. So first up, this was not my first official read of the year. Actually, the first official read of the year was Rainbow History Class, which is a nonfiction. But the first fiction book I finished this year was Masters of Death by Olivia Blake. Now, this is a book that is a bit controversial on Book Talk because of all of the Olivia Blake books. I feel like everyone tends to like this one the least. It definitely is one of her earlier works, and it is a bit to parse through, especially the language within the first quarter of the book, because it definitely reads pedantic and pretentious. But if you can get past it, it's a really beautiful story talking about the universe and what it means to live, like what it means to actually live your true self and your true life, and what it means to exist as a human and as immortal. So the main gist of the story, we are following the godson of death, Fox Demora, and even though he is a human, he somehow was able to live as an immortal for many years, and death has just turned a blind eye to Fox and has just never, claimed Fox in particular. But Fox many years ago fell in love with Bram, a demigod who is immortal. Bram has been doing his best to also live the immortal life, but Bram broke Fox's heart, and now it's many, many years later, and we're dealing with a problem because we have Viola, who's trying to sell this house that is absolutely haunted, and Fox, pretending to be the medium that he is asked to come in and fix this haunting situation. However, when all of these mystical beings gather together, they find out that Fox's godfather, Death, has been kidnapped, and Fox is the only one that can play the game to eventually free Death. And of course, Fox and Bram are having this back and forth turmoil of their relationship. And while there are many character studies and many relationships that take place in this book, Fox and Bram, they are just... I love their relationship. It definitely was an interesting thing to see their relationship play out. I did read it on Kindle, but yeah, this may not be for everyone, but I definitely think it's a book you should entertain if you like Olivia Blake's writing style. Ooh, I feel like this is a classic of the YA, queer genre. We have You Know Me Well by Nina LaCour and David Leviathan. I mean, David Leviathan, like, come on, like, queer YA books, who hasn't heard of him? This is definitely for those who are looking for a Pride-specific read. This is following Mark and Kate two queer teens from school. One's gay, one's Sapphic. And they're both trying to make it to San Francisco Pride in their senior year. And one night, Kate runs into Mark in the middle of a bar, and Mark's kind of out of place, and Kate's just sort of, lost her chance at shooting her shot with the girl of her dreams. And they sort of, come together and decide that they're going to have one epic Pride night. And of course, Mark is in love with his best friend Ryan, because the queer experience, falling in love with your best friend, who knows? But it's essentially one epic night in San Francisco Pride, the place of epic dreams, and these two teens sort of living out and discovering what it means to be queer and a teenager and all that, and to, become friends. So if you are very much so a fan of, YA, if you like a coming of age story, if you like a found family story, if you just want to get engrossed in what it means to be Pride and what Pride itself is, this is definitely a book for you. This one is for my Sapphics, for my Sapphic murder mystery lovers. The Killing Code by Ellie Marney is a YA historical mystery following Kit Sutherland, who has a secret identity that she is trying to keep concealed, but she's been working as a code breaker for the government for the past however many months for World War II, and while she's trying to conceal her identity, one night we find a murder victim who just happens to be one of the government girls that Kit works with. And then her boss, and these other two girls that are code breakers start to discover that a lot of these government girls are dying by the hands of a serial killer, and no one seems to be the wiser. So they team up to try and figure out what's going down. And of course, Kit and her boss start up a little relationship. But of course, it is the 1940s, so things have to be kept a little hush-hush. They're not the only Sapphic pairing in there, but I will say if you are a fan of the mystery elements of things, this is it. But if you're looking for fast-paced thriller, not so much. Also, if you have a problem reading about the mutilization of women and heavily misogynistic characters, may not be on your plate, because Ellie Marney, even though they're YA books, does tend to lead a little more gory than your traditional YA. Let's talk popular book series turned TV shows. I have not read the Heated Rivalry book. I do own it, but I did read Game Changer at the end of last year. This is Scott and Kip's story. Now, is the writing the most immaculate? Is the story the most well-thought, plotted out thing in the world? No. But are Scott and Kip just super heartwarming, and do I think their story deserved a little more airtime in the actual show? Yes. I know the show itself was really focusing on Shane and Ilya, but I think we could have, I know he wanted 6 episodes, but I think Scott and Kip could have if they had done 8 episodes instead of 6, I think we could have gotten a little more fleshing out of both storylines and maybe an introduction into some of the other characters in the story. But if you don't know, Game Changer is the first book in the Game Changer series, an interconnected queer hockey romance series following Scott, who is the team captain of the New York hockey team, whose name escapes me. And he's been closeted for many years, and he's been grappling with the fact that his career is not going quite as what he thought, and his relationship life ain't going quite what he's thought. But one day when he stumbles into the smoothie shop and runs into a very sleepy smoothie, the smoothie guy at the counter, he gets really intrigued by Kip. And Kip, being a young, broke college student who's just trying to make it through life, is really infatuated by the hot hockey guy who seems to always want to come back and see Kip. And then they decide to strike up a secret romance that leads to a lot of spicy as well as emotionally turmoil-fueled time. And yeah, I will say how things went down in the TV show aren't necessarily exactly how things went down in the book, because the timeline was definitely increased in the TV show. But if you want to learn a little bit more about what took place between Kip and Scott post that mid-breakup scene, definitely read this book. Also, that one is for the people who like a spicy little number, because the fun thing Rachel will do, she will give you some spice. Then this is for my people who are a fan of a little bit of good trouble. The Last Boyfriend's Rules for Revenge by Matthew Hubbard. So this, I don't know if this is his debut novel or what, because I know there is a sequel, or I don't know if it's a sequel or if it's sort of a spin-off of it that's already out. But this one is definitely a YA coming-of-age novel following Ezra Hayes, whose best friends have all just gone through terrible breakups with their boyfriends, and they decide to take a little inspiration from the movie The Last Wives Club and decide to form a club where they're all going to enact revenge on their shitty exes. And the first act of revenge is Ezra posting to the anonymous Last Boyfriends account, burning his ex's football jersey not quite outing him, but letting him know that he has the power in this situation. But the last boyfriend's TikTok seems to be growing in numbers because of the district or counties, you know, basically don't say gay, like anti-pride initiative in the school. And Ezra's getting real pissed off because the principal and everyone in that district seems to be hating on the queer kids. And Ezra basically takes the power that he's been given in this situation, the anonymous pride that comes with the last boyfriends, to start a big protest. And of course, along the way, Ezra does find a little bit of a relationship in there, which the relationship and the romance isn't a big key part of the book, but it is a fun part. So if you're looking for a little bit good trouble, if you're wanting to remember that pride itself is a protest, this one's for you. Now this one is for my spicy people. This is for the people who love sensual reads, for the people who just think that they need to get down and dirty in a polyamorous relationship with the devil and his first mate, basically. Still in the Morning by Akweke Emezi. Akweke Emezi is a non-binary author, and this is their first foray into Romantasy. It is a standalone romantasy, and it's just very interesting to describe. I heard someone describe it as Bible fan fiction, which isn't far off. So let's just see. This is a special edition, and it is, let's just say these are beautiful people. We're following Galilee, Lucifer, and Leviathan. Okay. I just want to make sure, because this is a 5-star read. If it was, by the way, the last book, this book, and the next book after this are my only 5-star reads of the year, so just keep that in mind. We are following Galilee Kincaid, who is a child of the famous Kincaid women who live on a land basically for only women can live on this land. The only reason men come on this land is to essentially breed, and then they are kicked off unless they are somehow allowed to stay, which they never are. And the Galilee women are famous monster demon hunters. They all have these magical gifts, but Galilee has known from much of her life that her gift is a lot different and a lot more powerful and scary than her other counterparts. So she makes the decision in her mid-20s to go off and live in the city, where she finds a bunch of friends. And one night, her friend, who is the trans daughter, if you're looking for some trans representation, of this big famous Nigerian African warlord, invites them to a party where they have this big, basically demonic, powerful mask on display. And of course, who does she run into? No other than Lucifer, who is the big bad guard in charge who's not allowed to let these girls through, but Galilee just happens to make a deal with Lucifer for a dance. And of course, that deal turns into a very spicy moment in the middle of the hallway, and Lucifer starts to realize that Galilee Kincaid has the power to harm him, which is a little bit concerning because he is the immortal being that is Lucifer, and if he can be harmed, then his followers, his people, can be harmed. So now the princes of hell are like, we need to kill her. Lucifer's like, I'm in love with her. Galilee's like, I'm kind of in love with him. And Galilee's family's like, oh my god, our girl's been manipulated by the devil. And then Leviathan, the second man in charge, is like, I hate you. But also there may be a little bit of polyamory going on here. Who knows? Well, I know, because I read the book. But yeah, 4 out of 5 on the Chili Spice rating. If you want a book that is just sensual and magical and just like delirium in a book, go for it. Now, something that is completely opposite. If that book is sexy, this book is utter cuteness. It just is pure cuteness. It is the first book in a duology, and that's The Spells We Cast by Jason June. We all know how much I love his other book, Jay's Gay Agenda. If you're looking for funny and cute and just like pure on wholesome time, Jason June is you. They have beautiful YA books that just focus on queer characters getting the fun that they deserve. And this one we're following Nigel, who is a mage. He just turned 18. And in this world, if you're a mage who just turned 18, you must be entered into the culling. The people who are in charge of this world are the guild, and they fight the depraved, which are essentially beings that are created from the disastrous, monstrous emotions that humans exude from themselves. And in order to keep your magic and enter the guild, you must survive the culling and all of its trials. And of course, during Nigel's first trial, he runs into Ori, another mage who's fighting for his spot there. And of course, not only do they discover a magical connection, they discover a love connection. This book, you just need to read it. It's a perfect YA romantasy situation with love and battles and trials. I will say, due warning, there is technically a bit of death of animal in here and death of loved ones, So do keep that in mind. But overall, it's a very, very fun, just like romantasy, and I can't wait to read book 2. I am back after having taken a moment to pause and charge my camera and go get a passport photo taken. If I'm looking a little bit more shiny and glowy than before, that's because I live in the South and the humidity is nice and pungent outside, so I'm quite sure I am covered in a lot of it right now. But moving on to the books that I don't physically own, first we're going to talk about The Entanglement of Rival Wizards by Sarah Raish. Now, Sarah Raish, when I first read, the first book I read by them was The Nightmare Before Christmas, and I have a love-hate relationship with that book because it was fun, and I really did like a lot of the moments in there, but it was a really hard book and concept to buy myself into. And then I read the sequel, Go Luck Yourself, and I'm like, ooh, okay, I kind of like this one a little more. And then I read The Entanglement of Rival Wizards, and I'm like, oh, there might be a 5-star from her yet. Now, this one was a 4.75 stars, and this little duology that she has is sort of pitched as like, it literally says here on StoryGraph, Allie Hazelwood meets Dungeons and Dragons, and I think that is pretty apt. And I do think I'm going to read the sequel, The Fake Divination Defense, this week or next week for Pride, so So this story, we're following Sebastian and Theo. So essentially they are academic rivals at this big magical school. They are working on their master's thesis, and when they proposed their thesis to get funding, the board basically said, hey, your theses are basically the same, so why don't you two work in a lab together? And they're like, well, they're not the same. We're technically two completely different like majors and tracks, and like we are constantly at each other's throats. But through the process of them working together on this thesis and getting to know each other, they go from rivals to friends with benefits to more and everything. And there's a lot of trauma related particularly to like Sebastian and Theo's past that we get to mull over, and this book is super spicy. So if you're looking for spicy Dungeons and Dragons with a lot of emotional depth to it, I definitely think this one is for you. And yeah, I can't wait to read the sequel to it. I do wish that Sarah would put out a little Sapphic number. I've yet to see anything Sapphic from her. Alright, and then up next we have The Fake Boyfriend Fiasco by Talia Hibbert. So this is for those out there looking for where are the bisexual men, because they never really get represented in media nowadays. So I don't know if this is a part of a series, but it's an interconnected standalone. Oh well. But essentially you're following Nick, who is this major English football player, and he's still kind of reeling after a bad breakup and all that. And there's this woman who he's constantly chasing him and isn't quite getting the memo. So one night when he's at the same villa and resort as Arya and her friend, she basically stops and says, can one of you kiss me? And of course Arya's friend's a gay man, so there's that. And Arya's like, sure, why not? And then of course Nick is just fully taken aback by Arya. And he's like determined, I'm going to make this woman my wife, my girlfriend. And Arya's like, listen, I've not been through the best of situations in the past with my relationships, so I just want to be friends. Then Nick's like, let's pivot and basically say, well, maybe I need a fake girlfriend. Can you be my fake girlfriend? And she's like, I guess so if you really need that. And he offers her like a huge sum of money and like basically a free vacation. And Arya's like, sure, how can I pass it up? And of course, while they're on this vacation and she's playing the fake girlfriend, lots of romance and spicy stuff ensues from there. I will say, do check your trigger warnings for this, because it's revealed in the first couple of chapters. But let's just say there's a big reason why she doesn't want to be in relationships, and it's quite out of the gate. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Didn't see that one coming. But yeah, so if you're looking for bisexual men, this one is for you. Also, she's a tattoo artist. And it's usually the men that are tattoo artists that we're reading about in our books, isn't it? And then the last one that we're going to talk about is for my Saphics. For my Saphics who want insta-love, who are on that U-Haul train, and that's Where There's Smoke by Erica Alexander. So this one is set in a small town in Louisiana that's essentially a very fictionalized town that is very queer and BIPOC, just central. Everyone's a little gay in this city. And we're following Fee, who's recently lost their grandfather. They're also non-binary. They are a firefighter, and their grandfather was essentially their whole world. As they are in this mourning process, they try the strawberry shortcake at the diner, and they're like, hey, this hasn't been here before. Like, I really like this. Who made it? And the diner owner goes, oh, the granddaughter of the new baker across the way. And then they catch the eyes of Angel, and Fee has never been more obsessed in their life. But Angel's none the wiser. But Angel comes back a year later after the loss of her grandmother, and then she runs into Fee, and then it's just like insta love, insta sparks, let's U-Haul till the day goes by. There are some tough situations discussed in here, obviously, with the loss of loved ones, and then there's firefighter, there's fires, and all that. But if you just want spicy, cutesy, small town slice of life that just like kind of goes that insta-lovey 0 to 100 like vibe, and you're looking for a little Sapphic, this one's definitely up your alley. And I'm excited to read more by this author, because I found that sometimes in trying to find Sapphic literature, they lean a very specific way that isn't necessarily my vibe, and this author definitely leans towards my vibe. And my dog is currently throwing a fit outside my door, so I think that's his way of saying it's time to end the video for the day. But let me know what your favorite queer reads are, what you're looking to read for this Pride. If you got a new rec from me today, let me know which ones you're going to be reading in the comments down below, and I will see y'all in the next one.